Hello everybody! This video talk is part of the READY project, an Erasmus Plus EU project. So who am I and why this contribution? My name is Inge Strass. I'm a teacher and teacher educator for English as a foreign language, so not a religious education teacher. I grew up at a time and a place where religion played quite a role. I'm a Protestant, and at the time and the place where I grew up, a Catholic was the other and as such excluded. I had no real knowledge of any other faiths, let alone contact with people from other faiths like Muslims and so on. And this in today's world is so outdated in our globalized world. So now, as an English teacher, of course I have a strong interest in cultural diversity, and in that capacity I was part of the READY project, and I was in Karlstad in Sweden, and there I learned a lot about the Swedish curriculum, and of course the focus there was on differences. But let me talk about similarities first. At the time I had the opportunity to observe 3 lessons at different schools, religious education lessons, and there are lots of similarities. Procedures resemble very much lessons you could observe in Germany. They depend a lot on the teachers who teach and also the learner groups. Teachers employ a variety of methods and techniques, and also media, like there's teacher input, there's use of text, there's use of films, there's individual work, pair work, group work, discussion, student presentation, lots of teacher questions, and sometimes also board plans for results. Learners often drift off tasks when they feel the lessons have no real relevance for them, and they wake up whenever questions are raised that interest them. What was very obvious was that all the lessons were very much content-based and not so much about, discussions about life questions. I'm going to talk now about the 3 lessons I saw, and I'll just pick out one remarkable aspect, and of course now I'm more into differences, what sticks out, what was interesting. So the first lesson I saw was a lesson on the Abrahamic religions, distinguishing them, and the interesting thing there was that the teacher had a certain dress code. She likes to dress according to the lesson content. So in that particular lesson, she wore a t-shirt with a big cross on the back. The students didn't even notice, and it took us some time to see that, but it was her particular dress code for the day. She also showed us her classroom. The lesson we saw didn't take place in that room. She showed us a classroom, and that was filled with lots of paraphernalia of all the religions she taught. So there were diverse holy texts, there were Tibetan prayer flags, there were Jewish candelabra, posters on the wall, etc., etc. So that was quite interesting. And of course it showed that subject matter is important. The second lesson was an introduction to the Catholic faith. So the teacher showed a film about a Swedish couple who converted to Catholicism. This is clever in a way because, of course, the new converts had to learn about their new faith, and they had the same pre-knowledge as the students who viewed the film. What was interesting there is that the students would have watched the film about the religious practices of a remote South Sea tribe with the same detached interest as that film about Catholics, their interest was actually raised when the topic of confession came up. Later, the same students said that they were more interested in life questions than this, referring to the film. So input, knowledge about religions wasn't really their interest. They would have preferred to discuss questions that refer to their own problems. Okay, the third lesson. This was a lesson about the history of Christianity, and this one worked with teacher input. So there was a teacher talk, quite lengthy, and after that there was follow-up work in groups where the students focused on research about one aspect of the topic. In that lesson I had some interesting insights which were not really related to religious education. After the teacher talk, which of course we didn't understand because it was in Swedish, there was a discussion with the students, and we could ask them lots of questions, and I was quite impressed with the students' English proficiency. And later on I talked to one girl who wanted to hear my assessment of her English performance, and we talked about English language teaching, and I found out that English language teaching at the advanced level in Sweden focused much more on language learning and skills training, where we in Germany have a very strong focus on content learning, like cultural studies and also some literature. So we have much more diverse requirements, and of course there's not enough time to do language teaching proper, or many teachers feel they don't have time for this, because in the Abitur, of course, they have to, the students have to be able to deal with the subject matter. Okay, so what are my insights from the experience? I realized that a lot of the teaching in religious education is content-based, so learning about religion. The other part of the curriculum, which seemed very important, discussing life questions, isn't something I saw very much, maybe because there wasn't enough time, because we were always given time to speak to the students. The most interesting thing I experienced was that the Swedish students definitely wanted to show us and to prove to us how strongly they have internalized what seems to be one of the core values of almost a national character trait, the core value of tolerance. Tolerance towards otherness and acceptance of otherness. So students might have said something like, we are interested in others, we're interested in otherness, we allow others to practice their faith. Tolerance is a major value which we all accept, and let others be religious, our own values are secular. We are not religious, or don't admit to it, at least. So, what's my point? In a global world, diversity is a fact, and it raises lots of questions and leads to lots of conflicts. Religion, religious education, can help address these questions and help find answers to these questions, or at least help lead interesting discussions about these topics. So the lessons should give time to address these questions. What we need nowadays is not focus on differences and increase diversity this way, but to build bridges between the diverse groups. And it helps if you focus on similarities here and try to include everybody. This is where I also have some worries about denominational groups, but this is